On a cold October night in 1904, the North Sea witnessed a battle that was never meant to happen. Warships, blinded by fear and rumor, opened fire, not on enemies, but on innocent fishermen. In 20 minutes of chaos, empires nearly went to war, lives were shattered, and a single mistake echoed across history. This is the true story of paranoia, power, and a tragedy born from darkness. One night, one error, and the sea remembered everything forever in chilling silence. The moon hovered low over the churning North Sea on the night of October 21, 1904, casting ghostly reflections on the restless waters. Far from Russia's familiar Baltic harbors, a flotilla of warships cleaved through the waves, battleships and cruisers, destroyers and tenders, a steel armada seeking glory on the other side of the globe. The Imperial Russian Baltic Fleet, vast and unwieldy, was bound for the Far East, dispatched to reinforce beleaguered forces engaged in the brutal Russo-Japanese War. Rumors of Japanese torpedo boats prowling perilously close had tightened nerves into taut wire. The men aboard were tense, sleep-deprived, and conditioned to expect danger at every turn. What they saw next would cascade into history. Under Admiral Zinovy Roshestvensky, seasoned yet beleaguered by reports of phantom enemy cruisers and mysterious lights seen over the sea earlier that day, the fleet crept toward Doggerbank, a well-known fishing ground some 60 miles off the English coast. Dense fog clung to the horizon like a shroud, reducing visibility to mere yards. Shadows danced at the periphery of sight, and in the gloom, fear found fertile ground. Around midnight, a lookout cried out, identifying small vessels ahead. In the tense hush that followed, panic blossomed like a thunderstorm in a desert, suddenly explosive and impossible to contain. The fleet's searchlights pierced the darkness, severing night from sight. Blinding beams converged upon slow-moving silhouettes that were, in truth, British fishing trawlers from Hull, goaded by nets cast low into the sea and the steady rhythm of men hauling in their catch. Yet the Russians saw not fishermen. Through the haze of dread, they beheld Japanese torpedo boats, swift, silent predators of the deep. Without confirmation, without hesitation, Admiral Roshestvensky gave the order. The still night exploded into fire and thunder as heavy guns belched molten lead toward the unsuspecting vessels. At first, it was just noise, dull thuds, distant and indistinct. But then came the sharper cracks of splintered wood and the anguished cries of men who had only moments before been singing shanties and swapping jokes under star-speckled skies. The Crane, a sturdy trawler among the fleet, rocked and shuddered under the hail of shells. Its captain barked orders, eyes widening with disbelief as the hull tore and water surged aboard. Within minutes, the sea claimed her, and 2 of her crew were lavished into the cold embrace of the North Sea. Around them, other trawlers, Minnow, Mulmane, Snipe, buckled and splintered under the unrelenting bombardment. Fishing nets, heavy with the night's catch, became anchors of doom, slowing any attempt at escape. Men flung themselves across decks, faces etched with shock and terror, as explosions sent plumes of seawater skyward. 6 fishermen lay wounded. 1 would later succumb to injuries months after the ordeal, forbidding pain lingering far from that foggy battlefield. Amid this chaos, the Russian warships themselves became ensnared in confusion. In the melee, 1 cruiser opened fire upon another, mistaking Aurora for an enemy vessel. Shells meant for phantom torpedo boats slammed into steel plating, killing a sailor and a cleric from the Orthodox Church, who stood in silent prayer below decks. Furious orders crackled between ships, but none brought clarity. The night, once still and unremarkable, had become a theater of tragic error and merciless noise. Bullets and misunderstandings flew for roughly 20 minutes, moments that reshaped the course of empires. At last, a blue signal light flickered across the darkened rigging. A ceasefire. Slowly, as if waking from a fever dream, the Russian officers realized the unforgivable truth. They had not battled the Japanese. They had assailed utterly innocent men, fishermen who had only ventured out to harvest cod and herring beneath a benign sky. As the first glimmers of dawn brushed the horizon with pale light, the surviving trawlers limped homeward, sails heavy with grief and salt. Their flags hung low at half-mast, silent testaments to lives shattered and comrades lost. Back in Russia, word of the incident raced ahead of the fleet like an unwelcome specter. In Britain, newspapers erupted with fury. Readers were aghast that ships of the Tsar had fired upon civilian fishermen in what was supposed to be neutral waters, thousands of miles from any Japanese threat. Editorials decried the act as nothing short of piracy. Across the North Sea, tension rippled through diplomatic channels. The Royal Navy was put on alert, 28 battleships ordered to readiness. Warships shadowed the battered Russian convoy as it crept down the Bay of Biscay toward Spain. London's government demanded explanations and compensation, unwilling to dismiss the violation as mere accident. The Anglo-Japanese alliance, at that moment a pivotal geopolitical bond, made the crisis all the more volatile. Britain could scarcely ignore an assault that bore the stench of aggression. In Moscow, the Tsar's advisors scrambled to contain the storm. Russia swiftly offered an apology, hostile words cloaked in diplomatic restraint, while agreeing to submit the matter to an international commission of inquiry convened under the Hague Convention. The world watched as representatives from various powers examined testimonies and evidence, seeking to render a verdict that would temper rage with reason. The commission's findings were unequivocal. The Russian fleet had acted recklessly and without sufficient cause, but the calamity should not be deemed an act of war. With that delicate compromise, open conflict was averted. For now, Russia agreed to pay roughly £66,000 in compensation to the families of the victims, a sum that, though significant, could scarcely atone for the human loss and shattered trust between nations. Yet even as tempers cooled, the aftershocks lingered. Ships repaired and sailors redeployed, but the humiliation weighed on the Russian command. The Baltic fleet's long journey continued, marred by the ignominy of Dogger Bank, and months later, it would meet annihilation at the Battle of Tsushima, a defeat that reverberated across continents and foretold the tumult of wars yet to come. In the quiet years that followed, the Dogger Bank incident became a cautionary tale whispered among naval strategists and historians alike, a testament to how fear, misinformation, and human fallibility can collide with catastrophic force. At first glance, it was a simple mistake, a misidentification in foggy seas. But beneath the surface lay deeper currents of uncertainty. A navy stretched thin, crews untested, and a commander haunted by rumors of invisible foes. The fishermen who survived that harrowing night did not return as heroes celebrated. They returned as men touched by an absurdity that staggered belief. Their homes in Hull bore the marks of sorrow. Houses that once echoed with tales of abundant catches now reverberated with quiet grief. Wives knitted in somber silence, children gazed out to sea less often, the horizon no longer a promise but a reminder of loss. Meanwhile, naval academies dissected the incident with clinical precision, dissecting how a fleet with such firepower could so fundamentally misread a situation. Gunnery reports revealed astounding inaccuracies. Battleships that launched hundreds of shells in the chaos, yet struck few meaningful targets, as if the ocean itself mocked their purpose. Some scholars later suggested this glaring deficiency reflected deeper problems: imperfect technology, inadequate training, and a command structure ill-suited to fast, reliable decisions in uncertainty. Back in diplomatic halls, ministers reflected on how easily peace teetered on the edge of war. Britain's naval readiness that October was no mere show. It was a stark message that neutrality would be defended with iron resolve. Russia's leaders, chastened by the near crisis, realized that an empire's might counted for little when misdirected by panic and poor intelligence. The Dogger Bank became more than a spot on nautical charts. It became an emblem of the thin line between conflict and catastrophe, a place where one misread shadow almost braided destinies of nations in war. For years to come, sailors and scholars would recount the folly of that foggy night, not merely as a historical footnote, but as an enduring lesson. That humanity's greatest battles are sometimes fought not with blades and guns, but with fear and misunderstanding. In the greater tide of history, the Dogger Bank incident might seem a minor ripple beside tsunamis of war and revolution. Yet its true legacy was not measured in miles of water or tonnage of steel, but in the fragile threads that bind nations to peace or plunge them into devastation. The incident underscored how even the most powerful fleets, when driven by anxiety and poor judgment, can lash out blindly into the dark. Historians in later decades often framed Dogger Bank as an omen, a prelude to the calamities of the 20th century, where miscalculations and paranoid brinkmanship would spark infernos that no apology could extinguish. Indeed, with Europe a tinderbox by 1914, the fragile diplomacy that saved Britain and Russia from immediate war that October still seemed but a temporary reprieve in a world hurtling toward conflict on a colossal scale. For the sailors who lived through the night, memories were etched with a cruel clarity that no official inquiry could erase. They had heard the whistle of their own shells, seen friends fall not to distant enemies, but to the chaos born of fear. Those lessons, etched in metal and blood, would echo in naval traditions for generations, a reminder that vigilance must always be tempered with discernment, and strength matched with restraint. In the end, Dogger Bank stands not merely as a historical curiosity, but as a mirror to human frailty. A moment when the sea claimed not only ships and lives, but understanding itself, leaving behind a story of misjudgment that continues to haunt the corridors of memory. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.